Every successful inventor, CEO, leader, artist, songwriter, composer, mathematician, tactician has used the same exact creative formula, which is the topic of this video right now. And it's funny because the mathematician Gauss is the one who kind of put it in my mind. What he said was, first he has to get it, and then he has to get it. And what he's talking about is the intuition comes first, and then he takes that intuition and makes it into mathematics. I'll give you a way more concrete example. So this is a train car, and in this train car, more than 2 decades ago, there was this young woman, and this young woman was struck by lightning. An idea came to her almost fully formed, an idea about this world, this magical world, and this young boy, an orphan, who had to discover it piece by piece. And she wrote that book over the period of years, and she sent it to publishers. 12 times she was rejected. On the 13th time, by fluke, she was accepted. And of course, I think you know by now, that woman's name was J.K. Rowling, and the book she wrote was called Harry Potter. So what's this creative framework which I'm talking about? Well, I'm glad I asked. The step 1 is charge. You build up creative potential. Step 2 is to receive. You act as a kind of a lightning rod for the inspiration to strike. Step 3 is to capture. It's not enough that you get these bursts of inspiration. You gotta capture it. You gotta trap that lightning in a bottle. That will serve as the power source for all future endeavors. Step 4 is to build. It's not sufficient to trap the idea. You gotta make something of it. You gotta build it out. You gotta make it your own. You gotta express yourself. You gotta sharpen your claws. And that is the 4-step framework which every single successful creative person has ever used. So let's get right into it. Step number 1 is charge, and there's 2 aspects to this. First, you gotta charge the body, but you also gotta charge the mind. Let's start with charging the body first. Most people, I believe, walk through life in a kind of a dark alley. They don't have enough light to light their own path, nor do they have enough light to illuminate the path for others. But there are some people who walk with so much creative energy, which it not only lights their own path, but it gives enough energy to light the path for others, and that is what I want to build for myself. So to build charge, we have to understand what it means. Well, what's the opposite of charge? Let's start there. The opposite of charge is discharge. And yes, I am specifically talking about sexual discharge. When I was young, I watched these silly comedy movies from the 2000s. American Pie, I watched 40-Year-Old Virgin, I watched Road Trip, and the commonality between all these movies was that sex was the most important thing a man could do. And there was nothing more important than increasing your body count. And I kind of believed that. So I put sex on the pedestal. But at this point, somebody gave me this book, this audiobook called The Wisdom of Success by Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill. It's structured like a conversation. And you've probably heard of Napoleon Hill. He's a writer of Think and Grow Rich. But I'm just telling you right now, Think and Grow Rich is kind of a mediocre book in my opinion. If you want to read anything by Napoleon Hill, this is the book to read. But in any case, in this conversation, they talk about something called sexual transmutation. And at that time, I thought there was just some woo-woo stuff, right? Some random stuff. I thought it was religious propaganda. I thought it was conservative propaganda. I didn't know any better. But of course, I was in college at the time studying biology. I was doing my bioengineering major. And the more I studied about biology, the more I felt that maybe Napoleon Hill was onto something. So I decided to try it. I decided to go for an entire month with no sexual activity whatsoever, which is something of a challenge. You know, this was college after all. And it was true. It actually was true. I built charge in myself for the first time, and I knew it. And to be clear, it's not like I invented this. Nikola Tesla was talking about the same thing. He would go for long durations retained in order to build up his creative potential for his next innovation. So action step number 1 is to reduce discharge to once per week. So I'm not saying never have sex, right? Obviously, I'm not saying that. And to be clear, even Napoleon Hill did not believe that. He believed in having passionate relationships. But he believed that the way to have a passionate relationship is to not give in to the sexual pleasures every time you feel like it. In fact, passion is built by retention. Passion is built through discipline. And if this is something that you're struggling with right now, I get it. I understand. In fact, I have a new video which is in the works right now. The title is going to be Don't Accept Gifts from the Enemy. And the thumbnail is gonna look something like this. So when that video comes out, watch this if you're struggling with this aspect. Now, speaking about YouTube, I found a new feature on YouTube which I've never seen before. So if you're on your phone right now, hit the 3 dots icon on the right side of your screen. You're gonna see this pop up and it's gonna say hype. If you want to, hit the hype button. Let's just see what happens. So I'm running this experiment, right? I don't know how powerful this hype feature is. Maybe it's powerful. In fact, YouTube has built a whole thing around this. They built leaderboards and whatnot, but I just never even knew about this feature. And the interesting thing is, you can actually hype a video more than once. So if you're a real gangster, right? If you really want to watch this video fly, then hit the hype button more than once. Let's see what happens. Now we talked about charging the body. Let's talk about charging the mind. So this is how this works. Imagine you had two fridges. One looks like this and the other looks like this. Let's say you had two chefs and both of them have the same exact skill level. Which chef do you think would come up with a better dish? Well, obviously, the one to the right is going to come up with a better dish. Why? Simply because he has better ingredients. If you're filling your brain with meaningless entertainment, with political drivel, or self-improvement content which is nothing more than procrastination and entertainment, then it means that you're feeding your brain with junk food. If somebody came to you for advice to improve his physique, what's the first thing that you would tell him? You'd tell him to improve his diet. And the exact same thing is true for your mind. Here's the central rule. I want you to take this to the bank, which is you can only cook what's in the fridge. In other words, your creative output is going to be determined by what you have already consumed, what's already in the fridge for you. So if you have low quality ingredients in the fridge, your outputs are going to be low quality. If you have an empty fridge, you're not going to have an output at all. On the other hand, if you had high quality ingredients in the fridge ready to cook, then you can actually produce something of great value. J.K. Rowling, when she was young, she read Narnia, she read the Book of Dragons, she read The Little White Horse, all these fantasy series. And when she was older, she went to school to study the classics. So she literally spent years studying Greco-Roman history, politics, philosophy, culture, literature, everything. So when it came time for her to write her novel, she was drawing from a fully stocked fridge. Let's look at Mozart. When Mozart was young, he was tutored by one of the best. His father was actually a well-accomplished musician and a composer in his own right. Look at Napoleon. Napoleon read the Iliad, he read the Odyssey, he read the Aeneid, he read Plutarch's Lives, which was his favorite book, but he also studied science and mathematics. Specifically, he studied the mathematics behind parabolic motion. So artillery, basically. How do you launch shit and kill people? So artillery is called the king of battle. Like to this day, it's called the king of battle. And during this time, because he was so good at artillery fire, his position as an officer in the French army, of course, gave him massive influence. That laid the foundation for him to become the Emperor of France. In fact, he would travel with a portable library on all his campaigns. Now, most people think of Napoleon as a warrior or a general, but he was actually one of the great code givers, lawgivers of mankind. In fact, it is the Napoleonic Code and, of course, British common law, which serve as the kind of foundation stones for all of modern law. So what's the action step from all this? The action step from all this is to design your own dream curriculum. In other words, you literally create a study plan for yourself. Step one at getting good at any skill is to first understand what you need to do. Like, what are the resources that you need to consume? What does good look like? And I'm doing this right now. So I'm working on a novel, my first ever novel, and it's set in the post-Homeric world. So this is called the Bronze Age collapse. So after the Trojan War happens, the entire world kind of shuts off. All the major empires of the day, which had been surviving for hundreds, if not thousands of years, suddenly start to flicker. And one by one, they start to go out. And even till today, the historians don't really know what caused this. But in order to write a novel set in this period, I gotta do my research. So I'm reading dozens of books about this period. I'm rereading Homer, of course, but not just Homer. I'm reading Virgil. I'm reading Stephen Fry. I'm reading Hesiod. I'm reading Xenophon. And also I'm reading books about writing itself. For example, Stephen King's On Writing and Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey. I'm rereading novels which struck out to me as really good. For example, The Gates of Fire, Blood Meridian, and The First Heretic. But to be clear, it's not about reading always. Sometimes it can be about video games. It can be about movies. By the way, if you want my reading list, I'll just copy paste this into the comments. This has the best top 10% of books which I've read, and I've read a lot of books. So there we have it. The first step is to charge. You charge the body and you charge the mind. Step 2 is to receive. It's not enough to build the charge. You got to be able to receive it. I mean, think about this, right? When J.K. Rowling got the idea for the Harry Potter series, well, what was she doing? Well, she wasn't texting, she wasn't on Instagram, she wasn't checking her emails, she wasn't having a conversation, she wasn't reading a book. She was literally sitting in a train looking outside the window as the countryside passed by. This is important because this put her in a meditative state, a kind of relaxed but alert state. This state of mind is the most receptive state to receive ideas in. Some creative people literally engineer this receptive state for themselves. For example, Dali what he would do is would keep a key in his hand and he would sit on his couch and kind of doze off. And of course, when he dozed off, the key would fall from his hand and make a sound and wake him up. And he would be able to recollect his dream because he was interrupted mid-dream, essentially. And he used this as the source material for all his paintings. This is the discoverer of the structure of the benzene molecule. So he was struggling with the structure of benzene for a while. Then he went into a dreamlike state almost by mistake, and he saw this vision of a snake eating its own tail. And then he realized perhaps that the structure of benzene is not linear, but rather cyclical. And the further experiments that he did proved that it was in fact cyclical. Nikola Tesla, he was going for a long walk. He used to have this habit of going on long walks. And on one such long walk, he was struck by the idea for the AC motor. It's a problem that he'd been working on for some time. It's so funny, right? All these inventions and discoveries happen when you're not expecting it to. And so he literally sketched out the idea for the motor using a stick on the dirt in front of him, and then went back home and did the experiments and eventually got the patent for it. But here's the thing about all these stories. I don't know how true they are. They might be embellishments. They might be some kind of mythologizing going around, right? I don't know, and nor do you, because you've not lived in the shoes of these gentlemen and women. Only story that we know for sure is our own story, so that's what I want to share with you. So months and months ago, near the starting of this year, I went on a 10-day meditation retreat, and we did 10 hours of meditation every single day for 10 days, which means it was 100 hours of meditation. More meditation than I've ever done in such a concentrated period of time. And it wasn't just a meditation. You were literally not allowed to speak to anybody, and nobody spoke to you. No internet, no phone, no TikTok, no music, no news, no girls, no work even, right? You couldn't even be productive because you literally had no tools. You couldn't talk to friends, you couldn't read, you couldn't write, you couldn't do anything. So I wanted to see, well, what would happen to my brain when I went to that kind of retreat. And my initial expectation was that it would be a time of peace and recovery and relaxation for me, because that's what I really craved. I wanted to get away from the business, get away from everything, and spend some time relaxing. But that is not what happened. In the first and second days, my entire brain felt like it was filled with static. So I have this thing called tinnitus. Back in the day, I used to be a machine gunner. So I shot the 50 cal machine gun, and my eardrums are slightly damaged. So if you don't know what tinnitus is, imagine the sound of a mosquito, but it's like right there in your ear, and it never turns off. So literally for the past years and years, that constant buzzing sound has been in my ear. But usually you don't notice it because you're focused on something else. But when you're focused on nothing else because you're doing meditation, that's the only thing you can hear, and the mind kind of fixates around it. So if the tinnitus wasn't bad enough, I started to get a lot of negative thoughts around guilt and anxiety. Thoughts like, well, I shouldn't be here. I should be working on the business. What happens to my business if I'm here for 10 days without internet access, right? Things like this. These kinds of thoughts and this kind of activity pattern is called the DMN, the default mode network. And for those first 2 days, I almost couldn't handle it. The DMN for me was so hyperactive. But on day 3, something happened which I've never experienced before nor have experienced since. I woke up in the morning and I noticed that I had tears by the edges of my eyes, and the dream that I recollect having had glaciers in it, like this ice and just white snow everywhere. And I woke up feeling so light and energetic. And it's so interesting because I actually almost forgot this entire day happened. I was reconstructing the experience of the meditation retreat day for day, and it was only after the retreat was done that I remembered the importance of day 3. I believe that the reason I have no memories from this day is because that the internal narrator was turned off. There was no internal narrator. And of course, human beings remember things through stories. So there was no story. That entire day I was in the moment. And day 4 was something altogether new. I got this spark. I got this full idea for a novel, for a story, kind of downloaded into my brain over the period of an hour or so. Like literally what I talked about with J.K. Rowling, I almost didn't believe that story because it felt too good to be true, right? But I'm here to tell you right now that I think it is actually true. For those few days, I made my mind as receptive as possible. Remember in the starting of this video, I was talking about how you make your mind into a lightning rod, which collects the charge. I did that without even knowing what I was doing. But the truth was that I wasn't prepared for this, because step number 3 is capture. You got to capture the idea. But the thing is, in this meditation retreat, one of the rules was that you couldn't write. So they literally told us not to bring journals, not to bring books, not to bring notebooks, nothing like that. And I didn't. I followed that rule. But somehow I had snuck in a pen. But even so, I had nothing to write with. So I would sneak into the men's room and I would gather these sheafs of paper towels. You know, the paper towels that you use to wipe your hands on? I would just take those. And every square inch of these paper towels is covered in writing. So during the day, when they would give us breaks from the meditation, I would sneak all the way to this kind of lonely spot in the meditation retreat, this picnic table, and I would gaze into the Pacific Ocean, into the abyss, and I would just write for hours. And then at night, I would have a tent of my own. I would turn on my candle and write by candlelight. And at some point, my pen ran out of ink, but I still had so much more that I had to put on paper. So I would use the impressions of the pen tip on the paper, just like the impressions, right? I would use impressions to write because I had to get it out. I had to capture this idea. And if I knew it, I intuited that if I didn't capture the ideas then and there, then the idea would get discharged, it would be dissipated. So I had to capture it. I call this lightning in the bottle. When that spark comes, it's not yours. It's not yours forever. You gotta trap it. You gotta capture it. And that brings us neatly into step 4, which is the build phase. Just because you got the clever idea does not mean that it belongs to you. The idea is out there. It's looking for the right vessel for it to be carried in. Now, different terms have been proposed for this. Some people call it the collective consciousness. Some call it the zeitgeist. I don't really care what you decide to call it. The idea is that you are not alone and you are not more clever than everybody else on the planet. Like, other people are also seeing the same things that you're seeing, which means that they have the potential to have the same ideas that you're having. So if you don't take action on it, the idea will find somebody else who does. So that's why the build phase is important. Just because you have a clever idea does not mean anything. It means nothing. The world is full of clever people with clever ideas. The world is severely lacking in the people who take those ideas and bring it into action to make something out of it. So if you have an idea for an invention, you got to make the invention. You have an idea for a story, you got to write that story. If you have an idea for a piece, a music piece, you got to write it, compose it, and get it out there. And now I want to close out this video with an example which draws together all the disparate strings of this video into one crystallized thing. So as you know, I'm working on this novel set in the Bronze Age collapse. But to make this novel successful, I need to have a successful trailer. A trailer which people watch and they want to share with others. A trailer which is so good that people want to support this project. To make that true, I need to have a killer angle for this trailer. And I wasn't able to figure it out. I tried for days, kind of brute force this, but I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. So I decided to go back and read Stephen Fry's Troy, which is a fantastic book, by the way. And the thing which struck out to me was the armament scene. So what's the armament scene? If you watched any action movie, you know what an armament scene is. It's the scene right before the big fight, where the hero and the villain too are putting on their boots, they're tying their laces, they're taking their pistols, putting into the holsters, they're wearing their leather jackets, they're putting on the sunglasses. Like, you see these kind of scenes in The Terminator, you see this kind of scene in Rambo. It's the armament scene. And this traces back all the way 3,000 years ago to the Iliad. There's armament scenes in the Iliad. But there's one armament scene which is different from the standard hype scenes. It's the armament scene of Priam. So Priam is the old king of Troy and is literally seeing his city burn. And he knows that the enemy soldiers are literally like behind the doors going to barge in to kill him. And he's putting on his armor. But the sad thing is he's old now, so the armor's too big for him. He's putting on his sword belt, but the sword belt doesn't sit right because his hips are kind of saggy and he's old. So it's a sad scene showing kind of the destruction of the city of Troy, but also the personal tragedy of King Priam. Now, I knew all this, I had read all this, and I had it in my mind, but I couldn't connect the dots. So what I did is I took a day off, and me and this girl that I met went to the beach. In fact, we went to this exact beach. It's called Chinaman's Hat. It's literally a place in Hawaii. And yes, it does look as beautiful as this picture intends it to be. And that's when it happened. Like, on the way home, when I was driving, the spark of inspiration entered my mind. I didn't have to work for it. It didn't feel like hard work at all. So I just took out my phone and I hit the record button and I spoke out the entire script for this trailer in one take. It was that easy. And then I went to step number 3, is to capture it. So I wrote down the trailer, made some refinements, and I went to step number 4, which is to build in public. So I published it. I shared with my entire community and also on YouTube the script that I had just written, and I got feedback. The feedback was positive. Guys were interested, they were curious, they were intrigued by the script and by the novel, but there was some problems. There were some parts of the script which were confusing for my audience. So I had to go back to the script, make changes, and then I can have it animated. Like, imagine this, right? Imagine if I wrote the script, I sent it to the animator, and he animated it, and I spent thousands of dollars on the animation and the voiceover effects and all this stuff, and then there was a problem with the script. I would have spent so much money and I made a huge mistake. But because I built in public, I got feedback which allowed me to correct the product before it went out. So I'm telling you right now, boys, building in public is a superpower. So now I want to close out this entire video with actually a warning. Just because you have an idea and you've started to work on it does not mean that you'll succeed, because the build phase is a game unto itself. When you start working on the big creative project, what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of motivation when you start. You're going to be hyped by it, and not just this, every single hour or effort that you spend on the project, you're going to feel reinforced because you're going to feel like you're making linear progress. The more you put in, the more you get out. But this will not last forever. At some point, this progress is going to slow down. You're going to be putting effort and time, but you're not going to see anything in return. And this is called the moat. And I'm going to tell you right now that every castle worth taking has a moat. Most people, when they see that progress is slowing down, they'll get scared. They'll think, oh, this is not what I signed up for. Maybe I don't want this castle. Maybe there's a bigger castle over there. Maybe I go for that castle instead. So they'll exit the moat and they'll attack a different castle without realizing that that castle has a moat as well. Because every castle worth taking has a moat. So you got to become a siege master. And I have made an entire video about that exact topic. It's called The Kind of Focus That Scares People. You've learned how to create creative potential, how to capture the charge, how to start working on it. However, starting to work on it is, of course, just the first step. You got to see it to its end. That's why I made this video. I'm going to have this video pop up in a tile right now. Now, full disclosure, that video is a little bit longer, right? That video is probably like 30 minutes plus, but it gives you the tools to not fail when you're in the moat. How many months can that save you? How many years can that potentially save you? So with that, boys, I'll close this video out. I wish you the best on your creative journeys, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.